Welcome back to our world in the spring of 1953. We have seen some intrepid explorers make the dangerous assumption that they can scale Mount Everest safely. We'll follow them to the end of their journey a little later tonight. We have seen Hollywood make the false assumption that it can squelch television by putting bad movies into big fancy packages. And that's not all we're assuming in the spring of '53.
Right. Take books. In spring, Senator Joe McCarthy, claiming the State Department's overseas libraries were riddled with commie literature, actually got the United States government into the book-burning business for a while. But you know, it's a funny thing about books. It's bad enough to want to burn them, but it's downright stupid to assume you can. You see? You can't burn a book. All you can burn is paper and ink and glue. Books will not be burned. The same cannot be said about people.
In the spring of '53, this country conducts 11 nuclear tests in 80 days in the air over Yucca Flats, Nevada, and marks the second anniversary of the conviction of 2 New Yorkers as atomic spies.
Someone had passed America's atomic bomb secrets to Russia. This was an undisputed fact that the whole world knew. The federal government had laid the crime at the doorstep of 2 native New Yorkers, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. In April of 1951, the federal court of Judge Irving R. Kaufman found the pair guilty as charged and sentenced them to death in the electric chair to pay for their crime of treason.
At the time of their parents' conviction in 1951, Robbie Rosenberg is almost 4. Michael is 8.
The image of my mother is softness. Dark, round face, very soft, very comfortable. My father was very exciting, very excited person. We used to love to talk about sports.
The boys are allowed to see their parents on death row at Sing Sing prison. They make regular visits, accompanied by Emanuel Block, the Rosenbergs' lawyer. For them, as for most children that age, death is an abstraction.
Visits, to me, they were absolutely fantastic. No hearts and flowers, no upset. We played this game, which, you know, when you think about it, in a condemned cells in a prison was an odd game to play. It was called Hangman, where you...
I remember you playing that.
Yeah,
I remember
you
looking
spell
over your
out,
shoulder. It was a mystery to me because I didn't have to spell.
Right, you had spelling things, and if you got a misspelling, you got another part of the body. And if you had enough misspellings, the whole body dangled from the noose, and you just lost the game. I had absolutely no thought that this was a macabre thing to be doing when my parents were facing execution.
The Supreme Court refuses to hear the Rosenbergs' repeated appeals. President Eisenhower refuses to grant clemency. Treason must be punished. James Kilsheimer was an assistant for the prosecution.
We in the government considered it the most important case in the country at the time and for many years before that time.
Gloria Agron was an assistant for the defense.
There was a steamroller going to finish this case because of the protests in Paris and Rome and Milan, all over the world.
Demonstrators in this country and a dozen countries in Europe protest the death sentence, some because they believe the Rosenbergs are innocent, others because it's the first time anyone will have been executed in peacetime for conspiracy to commit espionage. Robert Lamphere had worked on the case for the FBI.
We had thousands of American boys dying in Korea, and the idea that we would, at the height of the Korean War, give in to the protests that were being mounted by the Soviet propaganda machine was just unthinkable.
The White House gets thousands of letters and telegrams every week, pleading for the Rosenbergs' lives. Robbie and Michael Rosenberg deliver their letter in person. On June 15th, having refused to grant a stay of execution, the Supreme Court adjourns for the summer. In 3 days, the Rosenbergs are scheduled to die. At least that's the assumption.
June 16th, never assume. Justice William O. Douglas delays his vacation long enough to hear new arguments from new lawyers, Mike Farmer and Daniel Marshall. Maybe, just maybe. Meanwhile, at Sing Sing, Manny Block has brought the children to see their parents for what may or may not be the last time ever.
I had really thrown a rather emotional fit walking out of that prison because they were treating it like the same old goodbye. And I knew that if everything didn't go our way, they would live one more day after Robbie and I left. So I started wailing one more day to live, and I just wailed that all the way out of the prison cell.
Bloch reads to reporters what the Rosenbergs have written to the president.
We told you the truth. We are innocent. The truth does not change. We now again solemnly declare our innocence.
June 17th, from Douglas, a stay of execution. Nobody will die yet.
On our way back from the Supreme Court, having gotten the stay on Fike Farmers' points, we didn't care how we got it or whatever, because time was life. So on the way back to the hotel, we bought a very large bottle of scotch, and we're getting ready to celebrate.
When Justice Douglas granted the stay, there were meetings in the Department of Justice. There was an application made to the Chief Justice to reconvene the court.
June 18th, the Supreme Court does reconvene, just long enough to overrule Douglas. June 19th, the Rosenbergs will die tonight unless the president says no. He is the only one who can. Finally, Eisenhower speaks, though indirectly.
The following is part of a statement just issued by the President of the United States. I can only say that by immeasurably increasing the chances of atomic war, the Rosenbergs may have condemned to death tens of millions of innocent people all over the world. I will not intervene in this matter.
The news reaches New York, where in Union Square, a celebration becomes a death watch. And New Jersey?
We were watching a baseball game, and they kept interrupting the baseball game with news bulletins. First, the Supreme Court overturned Douglas's stay. Then, very quickly, Eisenhower denies clemency. And then, horrendously, there was even a further blow. The warden announced that reporters should come early because they were making the execution early.
They didn't want to have the execution take place in violation of the Jewish Sabbath.
Rabbi Irving Koslow, the Jewish chaplain at Sing Sing.
The function of the chaplain was to prepare them spiritually and also give them some understanding of what would take place. They're frightened. I believe frightened to death. Everything that would occur, every detail, was gone through with him. For example, he was given a haircut. He was frightened. I told him a haircut was to prepare him for the metal piece on his head. A slit made in his pants. Well, that was for the electrode placed on his foot. I've never met a person in my experience that wasn't frightened of dying.
But at 8 p.m., die they will unless something happens. All phone lines are open. The Rosenbergs hope for a miracle. The FBI hopes for a confession.
We regarded Julius as a more apt candidate to cooperate with us than Ethel. We thought that Ethel was the stronger-minded person when it came down to facing death. We really didn't want either one of them to die. What we wanted was for them to confess and to name their accomplices.
It's almost 8, no confessions, and now, no more time.
Neither of them said anything. There was no expression on their faces. Mrs. Rosenberg approached the electric chair, and then she suddenly turned away from it and toward Mrs. Evans, and they kissed each other. The executions took place rapidly, except that in Mrs. Rosenberg's case, she required 2 more charges than her husband had. The customary number is 3, and in her case, it required 5.
As a human being, I felt that justice was done, that I'd worked long and hard on this case, and that the government's position was 100% correct.
I walked in the house, and there were all these adults there, and I just looked at them, and I said, what happened? And nobody would answer me directly, and so I knew that that was it. They were dead. I was really incapable of reacting, really, so I basically sat down and very dry-eyed just looked at my hands. And my friend piped up, "You're taking it just like a man, Mike," he was my age, too. And the woman who we were staying with hugged me and said, "You'll, you'll stay here with us." And I thought, well, you know, yes, I will.
But the young children, oh my brothers, they are weeping bitterly. They are weeping in the playtime of the others, in the country of the free. Lines from Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I thank you from a full heart. God bless you all. Lines from another Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth II. Come back to June of 1953 for a coronation and another crowning glory.
Come back to Dangerous Assumptions, spring 1953, when our world continues.
When his stomach balks, Davy Johnson reaches for serious medicine. Rolaids consumes all the acid required to bring millions 100% relief, and relief is needed on days like these.
I should have gone into golf.
Get serious relief. Get Rolaids.
Do you believe it? My gums are receding. You know, you can get cavities where you never knew you had teeth, at the roots. I am going to use Listerment, because the fluoride in Listerment can penetrate the roots and help protect them. All this, and fresh breath, too.
What's this stuff, guy? Aftershave skin conditioner. I know. I thought I was the only guy with sensitive skin. Every time I shave, I get it right here.
What do you fellas use? Because shaving irritates my whole face.
After. Try it. Looks different. Oh, it's rich. It's a lotion. After soothes razor scrape sensitive skin.
Hey, this feels great. And smells good, too. Terrific.
Sensible care for sensitive skin. Aftershave Skin Conditioner.
By Menon.
Your days go by fast. Your work never seems to end.
That's why Whirlpool cooking products are easy to clean. With cooktops that wipe up in short order, ovens that do the cleaning for you, and performance you can count on. Whirlpool, ranges and ovens.
We're making your world a little easier. Whirlpool.
The world heavyweight champion, a title steeped in a tradition of greatness. Now the youngest man to ever wear that crown, Mike Tyson, looks back at the great heavyweights of the past, plus the mini marathon from New York City, all on ABC's Wide World of Sports, Saturday.
Welcome back to the Dangerous Assumptions of Spring 1953. Like sex and Winston Churchill. This spring, this legendary English bulldog is to have knighthood conferred upon him by Britain's monarch. But when asked about the future role of women later on, he says it will be the same, I trust, as it has been since the days of Adam and Eve. 3 possible answers. 1, when it comes to Eve, Churchill knows something we don't. 2, when it comes to Britain's monarch, we know something Churchill doesn't. 3, when it comes to women, all assumptions are dangerous, especially in 1953. Start there.
Jacqueline Cochran at 43 broke the sound barrier. Claire Booth Luce at 50 became our first woman ambassador to a major nation posted to Italy. In London, 27-year-old Queen Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was about to be crowned. And across the sea, this old colony caught a case of coronation fever.
You act proud and I'll act prouder. You sing loud and I'll sing louder. Tonight we're setting the woods on fire.
A woman from Texas was so excited that she wrote Elizabeth a letter.
I said, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, arriving May the 30th, would appreciate, need accommodations. Please advise. We'll see you on arrival in London. Signed at Louise Cochran, 8148 Eastern Street, Houston, Texas.
The Queen put her up in Kensington Palace, and Miss Cochran was among the rain-soaked millions on the coronation route.
The moment when the Queen passed built up. We could hear the cheers of the crowd over the loudspeakers as she passed various other points along the processional way.
Frances Booth was an American student visiting in London.
Finally, this magnificent coach and these great horses appeared round the bend and came down Hyde Park towards us. And there she was. She was very young and very beautiful and probably rather scared.
We had 15 cameras on the route and 5 cameras in the Abbey.
Peter Dimmick was in charge of production for the BBC's black and white telecast.
The Ceremony itself was quite spectacular. Remember, this is the first time that a coronation from Westminster Abbey had ever been televised.
Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Union of South Africa, Pakistan, and Ceylon, and of your possessions according to their respective laws and customs?
I solemnly promise so to do.
I was tipped off from Buckingham Palace in the morning that Prince Charles, hopefully, would come in to see his mother crowned. And sure enough, just before the moment of crowning, he was brought into the Abbey.
Church bells all over London began to ring, and we heard the Archbishop's voice through this thunder, and the guns were so close to us the ground moved. I mean, it was a terrific moment.
The same day England gets a new queen, England's new queen gets a message that 1 week earlier, the men on a mountain, some of them called Everest, decided to have a go at those last 3,000 deadly feet.
I planned 2 attempts, what we called them rather military fashion assaults at the time. And the first assault was to be made by Tom Bodine and Charles Evans.
Tenzing, who wasn't chosen, said one didn't assault the mountain where Buddha lives. One made a pilgrimage. Tenzing wasn't British.
I think I personally was very hopeful that the 2 friends of mine would get up and would be successful. On the other hand, I really think that Tenzing felt that it was almost his right, in a sense, to be one of the first to the top.
Finally, Hillary and Tenzing spied the first team returning. This time, man had gotten within 300 feet of conquering the mountain before the mountain had conquered man again.
They did have, actually, I think, a little bit of an argument almost on the south summit. Tom Bodine felt that they could push on, and Charles Evans, who was probably the senior member of the pair, he felt if they did push on, they would probably never return.
Now a beekeeper and a pilgrim would see what progress they could make. Tenzing, Hillary, and their support team were, for the next day and night, stopped cold by the cold and the wind. When you spit, says Tenzing, it becomes ice and falls like a stone. On the morning of May 28th, they started to climb. Slightly more than 1,000 feet from the summit, the support team headed back down, while above, out of sight of the camera, Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary pitched a tent on the edge of nowhere to wait till dawn.
Even establishing that camp was not easy. There was quite severe gusts of wind. But I think it was around about 4:30 in the morning that the wind had eased off, and I looked out of the tent door. I could see that the weather looked pretty good.
They were fortunate in having a near perfect day. There was nothing more than a breeze blowing across the summit ridge. We were very tense by then. This was the climax of all our plans and efforts on the mountain. And a high state of tension prevailed throughout the 29th.
The final ridge runs along towards the top, and about halfway along there's about a 40-foot high rock step. It really did 29,000 feet look pretty steep and difficult. But then I noticed a narrow crack, just large enough for me to sort of crawl inside. and I was able to wriggle and jam my way up to the top of the step and pull myself out panting. But once we got up that rock step, I really felt we're going to do it.
They climbed the mountain until there was no more mountain to climb. Hillary took this picture of Tenzing.
Tenzing threw his arms around my shoulder, and I threw my arms around his shoulder, and we gave each other a good hug. So in the end, we really were quite emotional when we got there.
For 15 minutes, man stood for the first time at the top of his world. What did he see? The beekeeper said the whole world looked spread out like a giant relief map. The pilgrim said all the hills below looked to him like Buddha gods.
Take my hand, I'm a stranger in paradise, all lost in a wonderland.
Nepal, India, Great Britain, the United Nations. They flew 4 flags up there, and which man was truly the first man up there? Hillary never said. Tenzing did. Tenzing said it was Tenzing. Tenzing said it was Hillary. Tenzing said it was you. Tenzing said it was me. What is known for sure is this. Soon after Tenzing and Hillary returned, an Indian Air Force plane flew close to the summit, then reported there was nothing to show man had been there, ever.
In a moment, Our World continues. Dangerous Assumptions, Spring 1953.
Cheese, glorious cheese.
Order Italian food with real cheese. Order Mexican food with real cheese.
Cheese, glorious cheese.
Order sandwiches with real cheese. Whatever you order in your favorite restaurant, real cheese makes it better.
It's cheese, marvelous cheese, fabulous cheese, glorious cheese.
Jim Mitchell's eyes, intensely green. Slightly astigmatic. Prefers scratch-resistant plastic lenses with bronze wire frames. Jim Mitchell's eyes, corrected, handsome, and proud. Pearl knows how glasses work. Pearl cares how glasses look. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
Now through June 6th, buy a complete pair of glasses, get the second frame free.
Tonight, charges that our government is using questionable evidence to deport accused Nazis.
They turn up a witness in the Soviet Union after 45 years.
Watch 2020 tonight.
Welcome back to some legacies from the spring of 1953. Some of our most cherished assumptions were undermined that spring. Assumptions about human behavior under stress and the deterrent value of capital punishment. And the jury is still out on one presumably unshakable assumption. What if Mount Everest comes up a little short?
Don't let the stars get in your eyes, don't let the moon break your heart.
Hillary and Tenzing may not have climbed the highest mountain after all. A survey indicates that Everest's neighbor, K2, might be higher. An American expedition will remeasure both peaks this summer and enlighten a breathless world.
July 53, the war ended. Truce, not victory. The U.S. Army decided to issue a code of conduct for American POWs. They were not to let foreigners wash their brains. The North Vietnamese tried and found most American brains hard to wash.
After their parents' execution, Michael and Robbie Rosenberg were adopted by a couple named Mirapol and took their name. In the 70s, they acknowledged their heritage, wrote a book advocating their parents' innocence, and continue to pursue that cause. Last year, John Walker and Jerry Whitworth were sentenced to life in prison for espionage on behalf of the Soviet Union. And 2 U.S. Marine guards at the American Embassy in Moscow have been accused of espionage. Ideology seems to have been replaced by sex and money as temptations to espionage.
Will not stop.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the theater. Jaws 3, 3D 2. And in this corner, the video cassette recorder. TV has its own enemy now. The little box is found in 40% of American homes, and it cuts into the profits of TV. Ironically, the sale of VCR rights is helping to finance new films and saving some Hollywood duds. TV Guide kept growing. Today it has the largest circulation of any magazine in the country. Never assume.
Well, there it is, the way it has been since last fall, and the way it will be for the next few months. 13 chapters of Our World are scheduled for rebroadcast between now and the end of the summer. But this is the last of the series that began last September. Our World has not been renewed for next fall. You have been faithful and eloquent supporters of Our World. You deserve better. I hope you get it. Thank you.
When Paddy Chayefsky wrote Marty in 1953, he believed that television would be the center ring of the 20th century culture. But he changed his mind, and so in 1976 he wrote Network. It's a satire on television in which the anchorman asked the viewer to get up out of his chair, go to the window, open it, and yell, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore." Always a great idea. Trouble is, every great idea has a flaw equal to or exceeding the greatness of the idea. And nature always sides with the flaw. Take Our World, a great idea. Our flaw was we didn't have enough audience. But just because we won't be here next year, that doesn't mean we weren't here this year. We were, and we are proud of Our World. It was about history. It is about to become history. Nothing is always. Thank you for watching. And by the way, if you wonder whether this sort of thing gets easier with practice, it doesn't. And so it goes. For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
Sunday, a man who knew too much, a spy caught out in the cold, now wanted on both sides of the Iron Curtain, Riviera.
An ABC News business brief, now from New York, Sander Van Oker.
Good evening. Allegiance Corporation has announced a $3.5 billion recapitalization plan to head off takeover bids. British publisher Robert Maxwell has withdrawn his $2 billion offer for Harcourt Brace, and Kraft will acquire a foods division from Quaker Oats. A new index shows higher-priced homes sold faster and appreciated more than cheaper ones in 1986. Alaska finally will get something every other state has, toll-free 800 numbers. And Kentucky Fried Chicken is going into the sandwich business with what it calls Chicken Littles. On New York financial markets, the Dow rose 15 points. Interest on T-bills was down, gold was up $5, and the dollar was lower. That's Business Brief. I'm Sander Van Oker.